Hello and welcome to my channel. Well, if you know me on this channel, if you watched anything, you know I cut myself quite often. And a lot of times it's because I'm not using the best tool for the job in some cases, but many times it's involving plastic. And for example, zip ties. If you've ever if you like knives and everything, we always look for an opportunity to use our knife. Like, oh, this needs to be cut. What, it's sticking out too long, this zip tie here. Um, the thing about zip ties is if you're trying to cut it through by just doing a push cut, uh, you're you're going to have a lot of force at the very end that releases all of a sudden. And whatever's behind that, when it releases, is going to get the force of a knife blade thrown into it. Uh, for example, that scar right there was caused by a tiny little knife that I was cutting a piece of plastic like this. I was holding it with this hand, and I was cutting towards myself, which, is a no-no. Safety third. And it was like the last thing on my mind. And when it released, I was using so much force to cut through. It wasn't a zip tie. I was using so much force to cut through the plastic that when it released, my thumb stopped the blade. And it wasn't this, it was a little cub knife. But the best thing usually to cut zip ties is diagonal cutters. Now, you may have to squeeze a lot, to get it done. But you have no danger really of hurting yourself other than, in this case, if you had your finger up here, you might get it pinched. But that's usually a good way. Another good way is a pair of scissors. Again, you may have to, do quite a bit of sawing on this is a heavy duty zip tie, but you see when it went pink, what happened? The blades closed on themselves. They didn't go anywhere else. If that had been a knife and I was going something, right down there would have gotten smacked. Now, a lot of times, if it's something other than your finger, okay, but with a knife, if you're cutting and you're not expecting it, if you're cutting away from yourself, no big deal if it doesn't hit anything. But if you're cutting towards yourself, man, little knives can leave huge wounds, man. They can cut deep. They like to show off. You look at them and you think, a little knife, what's it going to do? The most it can go in is this far. Hey, it can do a lot of sideways cutting. It can cut things like tendons, nerves, things you might like to use later on in life, all because you underestimated, the thing. They told us in the military that an accident is like a set of dominoes, lined up. It takes a lot of mistakes in sequence usually for something to happen. It's usually more than everybody looks at the last final event and thinks, this caused it. No, there were a lot of underlying bypasses, and if you ever want to see some interesting stuff, watch some industrial accident videos and stuff where people did things that they weren't supposed to do, like going into a confined space on a ship without testing the atmosphere first and finding out later on there is no oxygen down there. Stuff like that. For that to happen, a lot of people had to bypass things. And with a knife, just keep in mind, you do want to use your knife as much as possible. I mean, I just look for opportunities where I could use a pair of scissors, but I've got a knife with me, and, you want to use your knife. But a lot of times scissors are the safer option. And this is nothing. I mean, this is no big deal when you've got hospitals nearby and everything else. But a major cut, when you don't have all your materials with you or situation's not good, cuts can turn into infections. And cuts also lead to damage, like tendons and stuff, arteries, veins, What are you going to do if you stick your stuff in the stomach? Yeah, you can seal the external bleeding, but what about what's going on inside? What are you going to do about that? You know, some of these things might take a doctor, and a doctor might not be available. So first aid is a lot easier if you don't have to use it. if first aid is like no aid, and then a lot of times that requires a little thinking. Sometimes before you do stuff, you're in a hurry, you're improvised or whatever, and you say, I can just do this. If you're trying to be that fast and everything, it's going to bite you in the butt one of these days. It's bought me. I've cut myself more than once, and it's usually plastic. Quite often it's with a small knife that you're not expecting anything out of. And yeah, big surprise. You know, what stopped this? Bone. Bone stopped it. Fortunately, there wasn't, I guess, any nerves running along there that I hit. But it bled a lot for a little knife, man. I had to put direct pressure on it. See, that's another thing. You need to know what you're going to do if you cut yourself. If you're getting into knives new and you've never, because sooner or later, I guarantee you, I don't care how safe you are, you're going to cut yourself. And you have to know what to do. Usually, direct pressure will stop the blood from like spurting out and stuff. You know, it'll slow it down. But usually you want to clean the wound and everything, even though it may be gushing blood. Clean the wound. Stop the bleeding with either a bandage, super glue. Now with super glue, you've got to be careful because if you haven't cleaned it, you can trap an infection inside there. But super glue works really well for, it's almost like stitches. You know, like this one, this would have gotten stitches in a hospital, but I just slapped super glue on it, and it worked out all right. But yeah, that's all I just want to say on this one is be careful around plastic with knives. I mean, among all the other materials that I've cut is one of the trickiest. That rubber hoses, you know, they're kind of the same way. You're going, and then boom. It's that tension, it's that force you got to get through. And then when it releases at the last second, there's nothing stopping it from going crazy. And it's usually whatever, watch out, Peppy. What's ever in the way, where's Ted at? He's the dino dummy, the dino punching bag. Whenever, you know, you're cutting with a knife in it and it releases, it's going to go, it's just like whenever you're shooting. Know what your backstop is. Know where that bullet's going to go if you miss. You know, what's going to stop it? Is it going to be just keep on going, or is there something solid that if it hits it, it's not going to hurt? You know, like a piece of wood or air. You know, ideally air, you know, then you can recover and catch it without severing a dino head. See, I didn't have it open. I'm not going to cut him open for no reason. Ted's problems are accidents. Sometimes intentional, but accidents. Sometimes he just doesn't know about traps and what they can do to him. Anyway, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, and be safe out there. And if you do, I'm not an expert on safety. I'm an expert on unsafety. I've seen and done a lot of unsafe things in my life, enough to be an expert on it. Safety, I've read about it and I understand it and everything, but I don't always follow these practices, you know. So there you go. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Hey, somebody left a knife lying around here. I would not do that, senor. Let me get it.